In the heat of the Australian day, when the red soil radiates like a furnace and the air shimmers with mirages, survival often hinges on a simple choice, whether to endure the surface or vanish beneath it. For many animals, burrowing is the solution, a laborious investment in safety. But for the blue-tongued skink, survival takes another form. This reptile is less an architect than an opportunist, exploiting the work of others to build a network of hidden passageways that serve not just itself, but the broader ecosystem. Where the wombat digs fortresses and the rabbit carves frantic warrens, the blue tongue moves silently between them, transforming isolated shelters into corridors of connection. The skink is an unmistakable figure. Its stout body, smooth scales, and striking cobalt tongue set it apart from other lizards of the continent. Yet it is not speed or venom that defines it, but strategy. As ectotherms, skinks live at the mercy of temperature. Too long in the sun, and their bodies overheat. Too long in the shade, and they fall sluggish, unable to forage or flee. The underground, with its stable temperatures and protective cover, is therefore a lifeline. But rather than exhausting itself digging deep retreats, the blue tongue specializes in scavenging shelters already made. Abandoned rabbit holes, wombat burrows, cracks in sandstone, each becomes a borrowed refuge, a ready-made sanctuary into which the lizard slips without hesitation. This opportunism is not laziness, but efficiency. Digging costs energy, and for a reptile dependent on external heat to power its metabolism, efficiency is survival. By inhabiting tunnels built by others, the skink conserves energy for reproduction, foraging, and defense. It is an evolutionary shortcut, one that over time has positioned the species not merely as a tenant, but as a quiet thread stitching ecosystems together. When the camera follows a single skink slipping into a fissure, the perspective shifts. The crevice is not an ending, but a junction, linking one underground chamber to another. The skink becomes less a solitary reptile and more a living courier between hidden worlds. Inside these shelters, biology takes over. A skink resting in a wombat burrow is not idle. It is regulating its physiology with precision. The burrow's cool air slows dehydration, preserving moisture in an arid climate. The compacted soil walls buffer external heat spikes, protecting the skink's delicate enzymes from thermal breakdown. Even respiration is affected. In the more humid microclimate of an underground chamber, water loss through breathing is reduced, a small but vital savings in dry environments. In this sense, each burrow is more than a hiding place. It is a laboratory of thermoregulation, a place where the reptile can fine-tune its survival without expending unnecessary effort. The advantage extends beyond temperature. Predators, from snakes to birds of prey, pose constant danger to a lizard that moves slowly across open ground. The blue tongue's signature bluff, exposing its vivid tongue and hissing loudly, may deter some attackers, but against a dingo or wedge-tailed eagle, such displays are little more than theatrics. The true defense is disappearance. By vanishing into a nearby tunnel, the skink removes itself from the predator's line of sight, exploiting the architecture of another species to evade death. Over generations, this strategy has sculpted a reptile that thrives not by brute force, but by tactical retreat, surviving through an intimate awareness of where the earth opens and where it closes. Yet the skink is not a passive occupant of these spaces. As it moves between abandoned holes and cracks, it carries with it fragments of the surface world, seeds clinging to scales, insect prey dropped in haste, even parasites that may spread between host burrows. In doing so, It inadvertently links microhabitats together, making the underground less a patchwork of isolated shelters and more a connected system. In ecological terms, this is a form of facilitation, the unintentional weaving of communities through movement. A seed dropped inside a burrow may germinate in the enriched soil of animal droppings, sprouting a plant whose roots stabilize the tunnel and whose fruits feed the next visitor. The skink, in its quiet transits, becomes an agent of ecological continuity. This role as connector has deeper resonance when viewed through a speculative lens. If wombats are architects and rabbits the frantic miners, then the blue tongue is the courier of the underground city, a creature whose very survival depends on traversing and linking. One could imagine the Australian outback not as a barren plain, but as a veined body, its tunnels serving as arteries. The skink moves through these veins, not with awareness of a larger design, but as part of one. Each passage it claims, each crack it explores, expands the reach of a subterranean metropolis built collectively, not by intention, but by instinct. From a human perspective, it is easy to underestimate such a role. The skink is small, slow, and rarely the focus of attention. It does not dominate the surface world like a kangaroo, nor sculpt vast burrows like the wombat. But in ecological networks, strength often lies in connection rather than power. Just as fungi knit forests together through underground mycelial threads, so too does the skink in miniature stitch together the underworld of Australia. Its contribution is not in scale, but in linkage. Without such connectors, isolated habitats remain fragile, prone to collapse. With them, resilience spreads, and survival becomes a shared endeavor. The camera follows again, this time into the dim interior of a borrowed rabbit warren. The walls bear scratches not from skinks, but from frantic digging long past. In one corner, a spider clings to silk threads. In another, beetles sift through soil enriched by decades of use. The skink pauses, tongue flicking, its senses tasting the air for chemical cues. In this moment, the burrow is not just a refuge, it is an intersection, a place where histories overlap. The wombat that once dug, the rabbit that once nested, the predator that once probed the entrance, all converge in this modest chamber. And here, the skink waits, breathing quietly, carrying forward the continuity of a network older than itself. What makes the blue tongue particularly suited to this role are its adaptations for both surface and underground life. Its large body relative to other skinks allows it to store fat reserves in its tail, a crucial adaptation for enduring long retreats underground when surface food is scarce. Its diet is flexible, ranging from fruits and flowers to insects and carrion, making it less dependent on specific conditions. This generalist lifestyle is the perfect complement to its opportunistic sheltering. Wherever a tunnel lies, the skink can survive. It does not need permanence. It thrives in impermanence, adapting to the architecture left behind by others. And yet, in this very impermanence, lies permanence of another kind. By recycling burrows, the skink extends their use beyond the life of their original builders. A tunnel abandoned by rabbits does not collapse into irrelevance. It is kept alive, its function renewed, by a reptile that sees value where others see vacancy. In this sense, the skink is both tenant and curator, ensuring that the city beneath does not fall silent when one species departs. The speculative vision grows clearer, a vast subterranean city, not designed by a single hand, but assembled through layers of tenancy, abandonment, and reuse. Wombats dig, rabbits multiply, foxes invade, and through it all, the blue-tongued skink moves steadily, carrying forward the function of connection. It is not the architect, nor the defender, nor the ruler. It is the thread, humble, overlooked, yet essential. As the chapter closes, the scene shifts outward. The camera rises from a close-up of the skink's scales glinting in the burrow's dim light, pulling back through soil and stone until the outback spreads wide under a searing sun. The surface appears barren, lifeless, unforgiving. But beneath it, invisible veins crisscross, tunnels linking chambers, cracks linking burrows, each line alive with movement. At their intersections, the blue tongue pauses, tongue flicking, body pressed close to the soil. It is here, in these unseen corridors, that the reptile reveals its true role. Not the fastest, not the strongest, not the most dramatic, but perhaps the most vital. The connector of the underground city, keeper of the links that make survival possible. At first glance, the wallaby seems built for the open. Its body is a study in agility, muscular hind legs designed for bounding across scrub and grassland, a long tail balancing each leap, and ears that swivel like antennae to detect the faintest sounds. To watch one moving at dusk, bounding in measured arcs across ochre soil, is to witness a creature apparently at home in the wide, unbroken expanse of Australia. But look closer, and another truth emerges. The wallaby's survival depends not on open landscapes, but on their fractures, the crevices, caves, and dense thickets where danger is briefly held at bay. Far from being a mere grazer of open plains, the wallaby is a connoisseur of edges, a species that maps the continent not by distance, but by safe zones. These refugees are scattered like islands across the land. A cleft in sandstone, shaded and cool, becomes a fortress against the day's heat. A tangle of acacia shrubs shields a mother with her joey from the eyes of raptors. A cave hollowed by centuries of weathering offers a retreat during drought, where cooler air lingers and condensation gathers in dark corners. For the wallaby, each of these spaces is not incidental, but essential. They are what ecologists call refuge habitats, small patches of security that allow a species to persist in landscapes otherwise defined by exposure and risk. In the extremes of arid Australia, where surface temperatures can soar above 40 degrees and predators are never far, such refuges are not luxuries. They are the thin line between survival and death. Unlike wombats, wallabies are not engineers. They do not dig or sculpt. Instead, they practice a kind of ecological cartography, memorizing where the safe zones lie and weaving them into their daily and seasonal movements. The landscape they perceive is not continuous but punctuated, a mosaic of exits and shelters. This way of moving across country is as much a behavioral adaptation as it is a cognitive one. A wallaby must remember where to feed, but also where to vanish when a wedge-tailed eagle stoops from above or a dingo approaches from downwind. It is a dance between exposure and concealment, measured not in leaps per minute, but in the distance to the nearest crevice. Predation has shaped much of this instinct. Raptors in particular exert immense pressure. A kestrel or falcon can snatch smaller wallabies, while eagles are capable of targeting even adults. Unlike kangaroos, whose sheer size and speed can carry them across open plains, wallabies rely on broken ground. A single second can mean the difference between being caught in the open and slipping into a refuge too narrow for a predator to follow. When startled, wallabies often bound not aimlessly but directly toward cover, sometimes zigzagging as they run, a tactic that disorients predators but also signals an intimate awareness of every rock and thicket within their range. Refugees also protect against climate rather than claws. Wallabies are vulnerable to overheating. Their fur, while providing insulation in cooler months, can trap heat in summer. To cope, they lick their forearms, where blood vessels lie close to the surface, using evaporative cooling to shed excess heat. But this is a temporary measure. Prolonged exposure under the midday sun is unsustainable. In rocky habitats, wallabies retreat into shaded fissures where temperatures may be 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the surface. Here they conserve energy, emerging to graze in the crepuscular hours of dawn and dusk. These rhythms are not random but entrained by the environment, part of a finely tuned cycle of thermoregulation that binds wallaby life to the architecture of stone and shadow. There is an ecological paradox here. Wallabies, though they do not dig, are nonetheless dependent on underground structures. The caves and crevices they use are products of geology, but often they overlap with burrow systems built by other species. A wallaby resting at the mouth of a rocky overhang may be only meters away from the labyrinth of a wombat below. From a bird's eye view, these shelters begin to form a pattern. The same rocky escarpments that attract wallabies for their cracks and ledges are also favored by wombats for their diggable soils. The overlap is not accidental. Both species are responding to ancient features of the land, selecting nodes in a natural network where safety, shade, and structural stability converge. This convergence invites speculation. If one were to map all the wallaby refuges across a stretch of outback, dots would appear, each representing a crevice, a thicket, a cave. Overlay the burrows of wombats, the tunnels of rabbits, and the cracks exploited by reptiles, and the picture changes. The dots connect, forming clusters, corridors, even circuits. From this perspective, wallabies are not simply individual foragers, but above-ground satellites of a larger subterranean city. Their choices of where to hide mirror the architecture below, extending the hidden network into the visible world. From a biological standpoint, this satellite role makes sense. Wallabies are herbivores, their grazing movements linking habitats through the spread of seeds. As they feed on grasses and shrubs, undigested seeds pass through their guts, deposited later in droppings near refuges where they spend the heat of the day. These droppings enrich the soil, germinating plants that in turn stabilize crevice edges and provide further forage. Thus, each refuge becomes not just a shelter, but a site of renewal, stitched into the larger web of plant regeneration. In effect, the wallaby is cultivating the very nodes it depends on, ensuring that the satellite stations of the underground city remain fertile and secure. The importance of these safe zones becomes most visible during crises. In drought years, when pasture shrivels and waterholes vanish, wallabies retreat to rocky refuges where moisture lingers. Their ability to persist in such micro-habitats often outlasts the availability of resources in open plains. During bushfires, their survival is even more striking. Fires sweep rapidly through grassland, but rocky crevices may shield animals from flames, while caves protect them from radiant heat. After the disaster, wallabies emerge from these refuges, reseeding landscapes with their grazing and droppings. They are not only survivors, but recolonizers, agents of renewal moving outward from the safety of stone. This role as both seeker and spreader places wallabies at the heart of an ecological dynamic often overlooked. They may not build, but they sustain. They may not connect tunnels underground, but they connect habitats above ground, their refuges acting as relay points in a larger system of resilience. The speculative vision deepens. What if these nodes are not randomly chosen, but part of a shared blueprint embedded in instinct. Perhaps the same geologies that draw wombats below and skinks between also call wallabies to the surface edges, synchronizing the architecture of multiple species into a single network. The camera lingers on a lone wallaby at dusk, its fur glowing red in the last light. It pauses, ears twitching, then slips silently into a crevice between sandstone boulders. As the camera follows, the rock dissolves, revealing a lattice of pathways glowing beneath, as if the landscape itself were wired with circuits. In this moment, the wallaby is more than a grazer. It is a sentinel of continuity, linking surface to subterranean, present to future. Its refuges may seem small, scattered, and incidental, but stitched together, they reveal a hidden map, the network of safe zones that makes life possible in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The ocean has always been imagined as a realm without walls, a liquid wilderness where life drifts and swims without constraint. But if we look closer, beneath the churn of waves, into the ice-cloaked margins of the poles, and through the volcanic scars etched into the sea floor, we find something else. The ocean is not open and infinite. It is carved with corridors, caverns, and cracks, and within this fractured landscape, one animal has learned to use space itself as a weapon: the orca. Orcas are apex predators, their black and white forms as iconic as they are unmistakable. But their dominance comes not only from size or strength, it comes from strategy. Unlike most large marine hunters, orcas are not content to simply chase down prey across open water. They shape their surroundings, bending the environment into an extension of their own hunting arsenal. In the frozen expanses of the Arctic, where solid ice bars access to oxygen, orcas collaborate to break through the ice itself, ramming it with their bodies until a hole forms. What looks like brute force is in fact the calculated carving of a life-saving chamber, a breathing space not only for themselves, but also a trap for seals and other prey that are suddenly herded into narrow, inescapable air pockets. This behavior blurs the line between hunting and engineering. Unlike burrowing mammals that dig into soil to escape the elements, orcas fracture ice to create new structures in real time. In doing so, they perform an ecological inversion. They bring air to the ocean, and they bring prey into confined chambers that mimic caves. For an animal that never touches the land, this is as close to excavation as evolution has allowed. Each crack widened, each flow overturned, becomes an underwater doorway into survival. The ingenuity of orcas does not end at the surface. Beneath the waves, these predators display a form of environmental manipulation that rivals any land-based engineer. Along rocky coastlines, orcas have been observed forcing schools of fish into narrow gulfs and submerged caverns. By pushing them into the blind corners of sea caves, the orcas transform geography into a net, converting a natural depression into a prison. It is a stark reminder that hunting is not merely pursuit, it is architecture. The landscape itself becomes part of the kill. Yet perhaps their most fascinating tool is sound. Orcas are masters of echolocation, emitting rapid pulses of clicks that ricochet off ice, rock, and prey alike. While dolphins also use sonar, orcas take this sensory adaptation to an extreme. The structure of their clicks allows them to see in 3 dimensions, detecting not just the presence of prey, but also the hollow spaces within ice flows or the outlines of caves on the seafloor. Imagine a cathedral of stone hidden in total darkness. To our eyes, it is invisible, but to an orca, it is mapped in crisp acoustic detail. Each call becomes a blueprint, each returning echo a line on a living blueprint of the ocean's hidden architecture. This capacity for sonic cartography hints at a perspective we can scarcely imagine, an animal navigating an invisible city beneath the waves, charting corridors we never see. For prey, this ability to redraw the environment is devastating. Take the example of herring in the North Atlantic. When herds of orcas converge on these silvery schools, they do not scatter in chaos. Instead, the orcas corral them into tight, swirling balls, forcing the fish against natural features like cliffs or undersea ridges. The herring, compressed into a dense mass, lose the advantage of escape. Then the orcas strike, stunning them with slaps of their tails, each blow a calculated act that relies on the prior restructuring of space. Without the walls of geography, real or manufactured, the prey could disperse. But inside this improvised cage, they are as trapped as rabbits in a burrow. What is striking about these behaviors is not only their sophistication, but their resonance with terrestrial strategies of shelter and refuge. Wombats, foxes, and meerkats dig burrows to reshape their environment into something survivable. Orcas, unable to touch Earth, achieve the same ends by cracking ice, exploiting caverns, and using sonar to unveil the voids hidden beneath. Their intelligence allows them to turn the fluid chaos of the ocean into a network of predictable structures. In a way, they are builders of invisible cities, ones constructed not from stone or soil, but from water, sound, and pressure. The survival value of this manipulation cannot be overstated. Orcas inhabit nearly every ocean on Earth, from polar seas to equatorial coasts. Such a distribution is only possible because of extreme adaptability. In tropical waters, where ice flows do not exist, orcas instead exploit coral reefs and volcanic formations. They drive prey into reef canyons or use the sudden vertical walls of volcanic islands to pin dolphins and fish. The principle is the same. Find a crack, a hollow, or a narrow passage and force prey into it. In this sense, orcas are less hunters of the open ocean than custodians of its boundaries. Their ecological niche lies not in the infinite blue, but in the edges, the seams, the fractures where surface and depth collide. Even the orcas' social structures mirror this architectural instinct. They hunt in pods, often highly specialized, with distinct dialects of calls and unique traditions of technique. One population may perfect the art of beaching themselves to seize seals from the shore, a strategy that requires precise timing and intimate knowledge of tides and sandbanks. Another population may focus on stingrays, flipping them onto their backs to induce paralysis before feeding. Each cultural lineage refines its manipulation of environment like architects passing down blueprints. In this sense, the true underground city is not just physical, but cultural, an inheritance of knowledge that allows survival to persist across generations. Consider the irony of scale. Orcas, the largest members of the dolphin family, depend on the smallest cracks and cavities to secure their meals. A seal must surface through a tiny hole in the ice. A fish school must be squeezed against a reef wall. A ray must be pinned against sand. The giant survives by mastering the minute. In this, orcas resemble burrowing mammals that create expansive tunnel systems, yet rely on the narrowness of those tunnels for safety. A wombat the size of a child controls territory by squeezing into gaps too small for a predator. An orca the size of a bus does the same, only with its prey. It is tempting to imagine that these strategies are purely instinctual, but growing evidence suggests that orcas understand the mechanics of what they are doing. They can improvise, adjusting their use of environment to new circumstances. In some regions, orcas have been seen creating waves to wash seals off ice floes, synchronizing their bodies to generate a surge of water that functions like a battering ram. The wave itself is a temporary burrow wall, a moving barrier constructed in seconds. No soil is displaced, no rock is carved, but the result is the same. Space has been reshaped to create opportunity. What does this mean in the broader context of life's survival strategies? It suggests that burrowing, cave use, and structural manipulation are not confined to land. They are universal tactics, repeated wherever life confronts barriers. Just as ants tunnel into soil and termites construct elaborate air-conditioned mounds, orcas fracture ice and echo-map the unseen. The city beneath the ocean is not a fantasy, it is an emergent property of biology, built not with hands or tools, but with instincts honed by evolution. As the camera pulls back from the close-up of a single pod at work, battering ice, circling prey, calling into the depths, the scale shifts. Beneath the waves, sonar illuminates a hidden terrain, rifts in the sea floor, ice caverns stretching like vaulted cathedrals, and corridors of basalt carved by ancient volcanoes. These are not empty spaces. They are stages upon which orcas play out their role as architects of survival. And in those moments, when sound maps darkness and pressure reshapes prey, the illusion of an underground city becomes less metaphor and more reality. The orcas are not just hunters, they are builders, builders of cracks, chambers and hidden sanctuaries beneath the sea. Across the Australian landscape, the wombat is an unassuming figure. Stocky, slow-moving, and often dismissed as little more than a nocturnal grazer, it rarely commands the awe granted to kangaroos, dingoes or eagles. But appearances are deceiving. Beneath its squat body and lumbering gait lies one of the most extraordinary engineering feats in the animal kingdom. The wombat is not merely a digger, it is a builder of fortresses, its paws carving through soil with a persistence that transforms the earth into architecture. In many ways, the wombat is the subterranean counterpart to the beaver, a quiet force that reshapes its environment in ways far larger than its modest frame would suggest. To understand the wombat's genius, one must begin underground. A single burrow can extend for hundreds of feet, plunging several meters beneath the surface before branching into multiple chambers. These are not crude tunnels scratched in haste. They are carefully reinforced by the animal's own body weight, pressing soil into compacted walls, creating structures stable enough to withstand floods, bushfires, and the trampling hooves of larger animals above. Some burrows include ventilation shafts, which allow air to circulate through the labyrinth, keeping the interior cool and oxygen-rich. This is not accidental. It is a survival strategy refined over millions of years, a product of Australia's punishing climate, where surface life is often brutal and brief. Inside these subterranean fortresses, wombats maintain temperatures that are remarkably stable. While the outback above may bake under the punishing summer sun or shiver in the chill of desert nights, the burrow remains cool, damp, and buffered against extremes. This thermal regulation allows wombats to conserve energy, emerging to feed under the cover of darkness when the surface is less hostile. The burrow is both a home and a time machine, allowing its occupants to retreat from the violence of the present into a climate more reminiscent of ancient, wetter Australia. In this way, wombats are not only surviving, they are carrying an older world forward, maintaining microclimates where life persists against all odds. But wombats are not alone in their shelters. These burrows are shared, willingly or not, by a surprising range of other species. Reptiles seek refuge in the cool chambers. Amphibians bury themselves in the damp soil near the entrances, and small marsupials use abandoned wombat burrows as ready-made homes. Even larger animals have been recorded slipping into the shadows when danger threatens. During Australia's catastrophic bushfires, camera traps revealed koalas and wallabies sheltering in wombat burrows, taking advantage of a fortress built by another species. In ecological terms, this makes the wombat a keystone engineer, an animal whose construction creates habitats for others, expanding biodiversity in landscapes that would otherwise be inhospitable. The wombat's adaptations for this role are as fascinating as the structures it leaves behind. Its front limbs are short but immensely powerful, ending in claws that resemble miniature picks designed for excavation. Its skull is broad and robust, allowing it to ram through compacted soil. Most distinctive of all, the wombat's rump is reinforced with a plate of cartilage and bone, effectively an armored shield. When pursued by predators such as dingoes or Tasmanian devils, a wombat will flee into its burrow, plugging the entrance with its rear. The predator is met not with weakness, but with a wall of living stone. In some cases, wombats have even been observed crushing intruders against the roof of their tunnels, using this reinforced rump, a defensive tactic made possible only by the architecture of their own burrows. There is a curious irony here. An animal so often caricatured as slow or clumsy has built a survival system that outpaces many of Australia's more glamorous species. While kangaroos must flee into the open and koalas cling desperately to burning trees, wombats vanish into a hidden city of their own making. The very slowness of the wombat is deceptive. It is not designed for flight, but for endurance, for holding ground beneath the earth while chaos rages above. In evolutionary terms, the wombat has opted out of speed and instead mastered permanence. This permanence carries cultural resonance as well. In Aboriginal Dreamtime stories, wombats often appear as figures tied to the earth itself, creatures that embody patience, endurance, and hidden strength. Some traditions describe beings emerging from underground, bringing knowledge or cautionary tales to the surface world. When viewed against the backdrop of the wombat's real-world tunnels, vast interconnected systems that snake invisibly beneath the landscape, it is tempting to see these stories not merely as metaphor, but as encoded observations. Generations of people living alongside wombats would have known that the earth was not solid, but hollowed, veined with life-sustaining passageways. Perhaps in myth, those hollows became the thresholds to other realms. Speculation aside, the ecological role of these tunnels is profound. By channeling rainwater, loosening compacted soil, and mixing organic matter through constant excavation, wombats inadvertently engineer healthier landscapes. Their burrows act as reservoirs, trapping moisture that seeps downward to sustain roots and microbial communities. In regions where drought parches the surface, a wombat burrow may preserve hidden oases underground, keeping alive not just the wombat, but the broader web of life around it. This interplay between engineering and ecology underscores a larger truth. The wombat's survival is inseparable from the survival of others. It is not merely an occupant of Australia's ecosystems, but a custodian of their resilience. Here lies the speculative thread. If wombats build burrows large enough to shelter entire communities of species, could they also be participating unwittingly in a larger subterranean network? The Australian outback is riddled with cracks, caves, and fissures. Wombat burrows often overlap with those of rabbits, echidnas, and reptiles. Abandoned tunnels are reused, redug, and expanded. Over centuries, could these individual networks begin to connect, forming a vast underground lattice beneath the soil. The camera lingers on a drone shot of the outback, its barren expanse slowly dissolving into a glowing X-ray of tunnels below, stretching like veins across a continent. What appears empty from above may in fact be threaded with hidden architecture, a collective city built not by design but by instinct. What makes this idea compelling is the wombat's sheer scale of excavation. While most marsupials dig short retreats, wombats construct labyrinths that can last decades, used by successive generations. Unlike the transient nests of birds or the ephemeral dens of foxes, a wombat burrow is a permanent fixture of the landscape, weathering storms and outlasting fires. Over time, such persistence accumulates. Layer upon layer of digging leaves behind a subterranean archive of life, a city without architects, where instinct alone has etched the blueprint. Even the way wombats mark and defend their burrows suggests a deeper complexity. Their famously cube-shaped feces, produced through the unique elasticity of their intestines, are stacked on rocks and logs around entrances. To us, it may seem like an oddity of biology, but to wombats, it is a territorial marker, a signpost in a network of hidden roads. The cube shape prevents the feces from rolling away, allowing messages to remain visible for days. In a sense, wombats do not merely build with soil, they build with signals, laying down a communication infrastructure that informs others where entrances lie, which paths are occupied, and which are free. In this light, the wombat emerges as something far greater than a burrowing marsupial. It is an engineer of climates, a guardian of biodiversity, and perhaps, in a more speculative sense, a participant in a continent-spanning underground architecture. When Aboriginal stories speak of spirits that rise from the earth, they echo an ecological truth. Australia's survival has always depended on what lies below. The wombat, with its claws and its patience, ensures that those hidden spaces endure. As the chapter closes, the lens withdraws from the wombat's quiet excavation. The outback above appears empty, silent, and harsh. But beneath, unseen, stretches a lattice of survival, cool, damp, interconnected, and alive. The wombat, the most unlikely of engineers, has carved not just a home, but a foundation for life itself. And in doing so, it reminds us that the real architecture of survival is not always built in daylight. Often, it is etched in darkness, carried forward by paws that never stop digging. High above the heat-shimmering plains, a kestrel hangs almost motionless in the sky. Its wings beat rapidly, holding it suspended against invisible currents of air, eyes fixed downward in an unblinking gaze. To the casual observer, this is a simple act of hunting, a small raptor hovering to locate a lizard or mouse in the grass. But linger with it longer, and the behavior reveals more. The kestrel is not merely scanning for prey. It is surveying the architecture of the land itself, tracing the patterns of cracks, ledges, and hollow spaces that define survival in Australia's punishing landscapes. The Nankeen kestrel, Falco kenschroides, is among the smallest falcons in the world, yet its ecological reach far outstrips its size. Unlike its larger cousins, which rely on raw speed or brute strength, the kestrel thrives through versatility and precision. It hunts not only in open air, but across the complex boundary between sky and earth, exploiting every line, shadow, and crevice. This bird is as much a cartographer as it is a predator, mapping landscapes in detail that most creatures never perceive. At ground level, life is a constant gamble. Small mammals risk exposure as they forage, Reptiles shuffle between patches of shade, and insects scatter across bare soil. To the kestrel's eye, however, this chaos is legible. Its vision is adapted for clarity at distance, allowing it to detect movement invisible to human eyes. Where we might see only uniform scrub, the kestrel sees highways of possibility, the faint trail of a rodent between grasses, the glint of scales near a burrow entrance, the shifting shadows that betray life against the earth. Each detail is processed in fractions of a second, turning the patchwork below into a navigable map of opportunity and danger. Yet the kestrel's interest in cracks and hollows goes beyond hunting. It often nests in such places, choosing cliffs, tree hollows, and even abandoned burrows as sites to raise its young. These choices are not incidental. A nest high on a ledge keeps chicks safe from ground predators, while a burrow offers shelter from temperature extremes and storms. The bird's reproductive success depends on its ability to locate, judge, and defend such spaces. In this way, the kestrel is both user and surveyor of the underground city, seeking out its entrances, memorizing its patterns, and building its life around the shelter it provides. This dual relationship, predator from above, resident within, places the kestrel at a unique intersection. It navigates two realms, the sky, where it commands perspective, and the earth, where it relies on the architecture of others. Few animals embody this duality so completely. In a sense, the kestrel is the living bridge between surface and subterranean, the scout that reads from above what others experience only from within. Consider its hunting technique known as hovering. Unlike many raptors that rely on soaring or ambush, the Nankeen kestrel beats its wings rapidly to hold position in mid-air. This allows it to scan methodically over a patch of ground, often returning to the same spot repeatedly. By doing so, the bird creates a mental grid of the terrain, noting where burrow entrances lie, where shadows shift, where prey is likely to emerge. This systematic surveillance mirrors the behavior of a surveyor pacing out boundaries or a cartographer drafting a map. The kestrel's hovering is not just about immediate predation, it is about building a library of spatial knowledge that can be applied again and again. That knowledge extends to the geology of the land. In desert regions, kestrels are drawn to escarpments and cliffs, where updrafts aid flight and ledges offer nesting sites. In grasslands, they patrol areas riddled with rabbit warrens or wombat burrows, exploiting the predictable traffic of animals moving in and out of subterranean refuges. In coastal zones, they target dunes and headlands, where shifting sands reveal cracks that serve both as prey shelters and as future nesting cavities. Across habitats, the kestrel is guided not only by the presence of prey, but by the architecture of the earth itself. The bird's eyesight carries another remarkable adaptation: sensitivity to ultraviolet light. Rodents in particular leave urine trails that reflect strongly in UV, invisible to most animals but conspicuous to the kestrel. From above, these glowing paths mark highways that lead to burrow entrances. To follow them is to see into the structure of the underground city, tracing its arteries in a spectrum hidden from human perception. In this sense, the kestrel does not merely hunt, it reads. The land itself becomes a manuscript of movement, and the kestrel its interpreter. Predator-prey interactions reveal how this role shapes the ecosystem. When a kestrel strikes at a lizard near a burrow, the reptile may dart inside, disappearing into darkness. But the kestrel has already marked the entrance, storing it for future use. If prey does not emerge, the kestrel moves on, but the entrance remains part of its mental map. In this way, the bird accumulates a working blueprint of safe zones scattered across its territory. Over time, this blueprint may rival the knowledge of the very animals that dig or inhabit those burrows. The kestrel, though an outsider to the underground, becomes one of its most skilled navigators. The speculative lens sharpens here. What if the kestrel is not only exploiting the underground city, but serving as its sentinel? By circling high above, kestrels provide constant surveillance, detecting threats long before ground dwellers could. A dingo moving stealthily through scrub cannot escape the kestrel's vantage. A goanna prowling near a burrow entrance is noticed from hundreds of meters away. Though the kestrel acts for itself, the effect is communal. Its watchfulness creates a kind of aerial alarm system. Other animals may not consciously heed its presence, but the balance of predator and prey is nonetheless shaped by its eye. This perspective aligns intriguingly with certain Aboriginal traditions. Stories sometimes describe birds as messengers or lookouts, beings that warn of danger or guide movement across country. The kestrel, with its ceaseless hovering and piercing gaze, fits this archetype well. From a cultural standpoint, it embodies vigilance, the link between the seen and the unseen. From a biological standpoint, it literally connects the sky's vantage with the Earth's hidden architecture. In both interpretations, the kestrel is more than a hunter. It is a surveyor of land, of safety, of possibility. Its role also highlights the interconnectedness of the underground city's inhabitants. Wombats carve deep fortresses, skinks weave passages between them, wallabies extend the network through surface refuges. But without eyes in the sky, the city remains blind to larger threats. The kestrel fills this gap, monitoring the landscape from above, reading its cracks and crevices in a way no earthbound creature can. In a speculative sense, the kestrel is the city's cartographer, keeping the map current, ensuring that entrances, exits, and hazards are charted. As the chapter draws to a close, the camera follows the kestrel's glide along a ridge. Below, the land fractures into gullies and fissures, each lined with vegetation, each hiding the traces of burrows. The bird hovers, then stoops briefly before climbing again, eyes always downward. The frame widens, showing fault lines etched into the land like scars, their patterns echoing the networks of tunnels beneath. One world is hidden in shadow, the other lit by the sun, but both are bound together by the kestrel's watchful flight. The Nankeen kestrel, then, is not only a predator. It is a reader of landscapes, a scout of the underground, and perhaps the silent link between two worlds. With each beat of its wings, it ties the sky to the earth, charting the city below from a vantage point no burrower could ever achieve. Across Earth's landscapes, survival often appears chaotic, improvised, a patchwork of instincts without design. Yet, when we pull back far enough, patterns emerge, networks of behavior that, though separated by species and habitat, fit together like pieces of a puzzle. Nowhere is this more striking than in the creatures we have followed: the orca, the wombat, the skink, the wallaby, and the kestrel. Each acts in its own sphere, ocean, soil, rock, or sky, but together they sketch a startling picture. What if their shelters, cracks, and burrows are not isolated acts of survival, but components of a greater system? What if instinct has conspired across millions of years to build not just homes, but the outlines of an underground city? Begin in the oceans, where the orca demonstrates that even in water, architecture is possible. Ice flows are fractured into chambers, prey are forced into caves, and sonar illuminates the voids of the deep. The orca teaches us that survival is not confined to open space. It is carved into hidden corners, defined by structure. Move inland, and the wombat becomes the Earth's most diligent engineer, excavating labyrinths that endure for decades, fortresses cool against the desert's fire. Then comes the skink, small but essential, recycling and reconnecting those excavations, slipping from one chamber to another, keeping old tunnels alive long after their architects have gone. Above ground, wallabies extend the blueprint into sunlight, turning rocky crevices and thickets into a scattered network of surface satellites, nodes of refuge stitched across the landscape. And from the air, the kestrel ties it all together, charting entrances and exits, reading the terrain with ultraviolet eyes that reveal invisible paths, serving as surveyor of the unseen. Individually, these stories are remarkable examples of adaptation. Together, they suggest a larger truth. Survival in Australia, perhaps across the planet, is organized not randomly but architecturally. Burrows, cracks and shelters form a lattice, a safety net woven beneath our feet. In this lattice lies a hidden resilience, a system that stores life underground where drought, fire and predators cannot easily reach. The ecological logic is sound. Australia is a continent of extremes, where fire can erase entire forests in hours and drought can linger for years. Species that survive here do so by mastering time and space, by retreating, hiding, and waiting out disaster. The underground provides precisely that, a buffer against heat, a reservoir of moisture, a shield against flames and claws. But more than refuge, these structures create continuity. A wombat burrow abandoned by its owner becomes home to skinks and insects. A crevice once used by wallabies becomes a nesting site for kestrels. Over time, the same places are reused, recycled, reimagined. The architecture is shared. What begins as the survival tactic of one species becomes the lifeline of many. This continuity is critical for biodiversity. Studies in arid Australia show that mammal populations often recover first around burrows and rocky refuges, where microclimates allow plants and invertebrates to persist through hard times. These nodes of survival act as reservoirs of life, seeding recovery after crisis. Without them, extinction would be swift and permanent. In this sense, the underground city is not metaphor, but mechanism, a distributed system for safeguarding diversity. Each species contributes, not by coordination, but by necessity, and together they maintain one of Earth's oldest insurance policies, resilience through architecture. Yet the speculation remains tantalizing. Could instinct across such different creatures be converging on a shared blueprint? Orcas are separated by oceans from wombats, kestrels by wings from skinks, and yet their behaviors echo one another. They carve, borrow, extend, and map. They create chambers, link corridors, and guard entrances. To view them separately is to see survival strategies. To view them together is to glimpse design. Perhaps the blueprint is not conscious, not intentional, but nonetheless real, evolution shaping bodies and instincts into co-architects of a fortress that stretches across land and sea. There is precedent in nature for such emergent design. Coral reefs are not built by a single organism, but by countless polyps, each adding its contribution until a living city of stone spans kilometers. Termite mounds are not planned, but the accumulation of instinct yields ventilation systems as complex as human architecture. Could Australia's burrows, crevices, and hidden shelters be another example, not built by one species, but assembled by many, each acting for itself, yet together constructing a city beyond imagination. The evidence lies in the connections. Wombats dig, but skinks keep tunnels alive. Wallabies choose refuges that overlap with burrow-rich zones, instinctively drawn to the same safe geologies. Kestrels hover above, tracing entrances that align with fault lines and cracks, ensuring that no node of the network goes unnoticed. Even the orca, though far removed in habitat, demonstrates the principle that survival emerges where space is reshaped into chambers. Across all 5 creatures, the theme is unmistakable. Life thrives not in emptiness, but in the hidden architecture beneath. From a broader ecological lens, this suggests that Australia itself may be understood as a layered organism. Above ground, harshness dominates: heat, dryness, predators, and fire. Below ground, life is buffered, stored, and renewed. Between the two lies a continuous system of safe zones, from ocean caves to desert burrows, from cliff crevices to hollow trees. These layers are stitched together by movement: skinks shuttling between tunnels, wallabies dropping seeds at crevice mouths, kestrels charting the entrances from above. The network is not linear but web-like, branching, resilient, alive. The speculative conclusion is both humbling and unsettling. What if this network is one of Earth's last fortresses, an ancient blueprint encoded in instinct to preserve life against catastrophe? Fire may sweep the surface, drought may wither the plains, predators may patrol the open, but beneath, in chambers and cracks, life endures. Perhaps this is not coincidence but necessity, evolution's way of ensuring that no disaster can erase everything at once. The underground guardians, each in their own realm, may not know the blueprint they follow. But by following it, they keep resilience alive. The film's final montage brings these threads together. An orca slips beneath an ice sheet, sonar clicks illuminating a cavern below. A wombat pushes soil aside, the tunnel behind it glowing with moisture and coolness. A skink vanishes into a crack, linking one system to another. A wallaby disappears between sandstone boulders, its refuge aligning with burrows beneath. Above, a kestrel hovers, the camera following its gaze as it traces fault lines across the land. Slowly, the images dissolve, layers of tunnels, crevices, and cracks lighting up beneath the continent. From above, Australia glows not as an empty desert, but as a living organism, its underground veins pulsing with survival. In the end, the blueprint is clear. Life here is not scattered, not isolated, but bound together by architecture both hidden and enduring. The underground guardians may never meet, may never coordinate, but their combined instincts form a map of survival, one of the most intricate fortresses evolution has ever drawn. And in a world where extinction looms ever closer, perhaps the greatest lesson lies here: that survival is not always written in strength or speed, but in the patience of tunnels, the secrecy of cracks, and the quiet resilience of those who know how to vanish beneath the surface.